Welcome to Principal Center Radio, helping you build capacity for instructional leadership. Here's your host, Director of the Principal Center, Dr. Justin Bader.
Welcome everyone to Principal Center Radio. I'm your host, Justin Bader, and I'm honored to welcome to the program Bradley James Davies. Bradley is an executive leadership coach, author, and speaker with more than 2 decades of experience as a teacher, coach, and principal at the elementary, middle, and high school levels. And he's the author of School Leadership from A to Z, How to Lead Well Without Losing Your Way.
And now, our feature presentation.
Bradley, welcome to Principal Center Radio.
Thanks for having me, Justin. Happy to be here.
Well, I'm excited to talk about the book because I know it's full of interesting stories and reflections on your school leadership journey. What was it specifically that prompted you to write School Leadership from A to Z?
The reality is that school leadership is hard, and it's hard on school leaders, and it's not getting any easier. I know this personally because it beat me down to a career crash landing that ended a career that I cared about very much. And my hope with the book is to certainly share lots of best practices and tricks of the trade that I either stole or stumbled upon in my 20 years leading schools. So in many ways, it's a how-to, but also it's a how not to. I really want to offer aspiring school leaders and veteran school leaders approaches and perspectives and practices that will help them avoid some of the pitfalls that ultimately led to me leaving school leadership altogether. And I don't think I'm alone. I think we have a lot of school leaders with the expanding stresses of the role and responsibilities and expectations. We've got a lot of school leaders going into work every day on fumes, limping into work, maybe at best, and at worst, leaving the work altogether like I did. And my hope with the book is to help folks lead better, because serving teachers and families and students obviously is crucially important, but also to help them thrive in the work.
Well, Bradley, certainly we have all seen the stresses, the tribulations of the last couple of years really weigh on educators and on school leaders in particular. What do you see happening in the world at large, in society, and in the school leadership profession that is causing such a crisis for school leaders, causing them to question whether this is the right line of work, whether they need to maybe take some time off? And what do you wish you had known from the outset of that period of challenge that we're all facing?
You know, what I can speak to is my personal experience, and that is that COVID did prove to be the cinder block that broke the camel's back. But it wasn't all COVID's fault. In truth, if you go a year back before COVID, at the start of the school year, I was so stressed that I got shingles. And if you go back 2 years before that, I was at such a low point because of school-induced stress that I experienced situational depression to the point where on one Sunday afternoon, I was laying on a couch in the fetal position, absolutely dreading school the next day. And the realities of that just shed light on the fact of how difficult the work is. And that if we're not very proactive about wellness practices, having the right approaches to the work, it can chew anybody up. You know, my book, School Leadership from A to Z, it's not a narrative of, hey, I'm awesome, be like me. Certainly there are best practices there that I'm excited to share and invite people to scale and try for themselves. But it's also a word of warning of I'm hoping to help school leaders avoid how low I got. And the fact of the matter is that where I got, I'm responsible for that. There are things I could have done that would have put me in a healthier place to serve my school better, to serve my family and friends better, and where I would never have gotten to the low where I got.
Let's talk about some of that decision making, because we don't control the external stressors. We don't control what other people do. We don't control what's going on in society or in the world. Talk to us a little bit about how you think about those stressors and your response to them, and kind of what you wish you could have done or would have done at the time to kind of protect yourself or maybe insulate yourself against some of those stressors. Because I think that feeling of this is not manageable, this is not sustainable, this is not a bearable amount of pressure is an increasingly common one for school leaders.
There are 5 key ingredients to leading well without losing your way. The first one I highlight in the book is just kids. I have a chapter in the book called H is for Hurricane Hope. And the school leader functions in the eye of Hurricane Hope. And Hurricane Hope is the inverse of a real hurricane, whereas normally the eye is the safe place and all the craziness is going on around the Doppler radar, around the eye of the hurricane. In school leadership, hope and positivity and joy are all around you. And there you are in the eye of the hurricane, just absorbing all of this negativity from parents and teachers, etc. And so one of the key things for school leaders to flourish and to lead well without losing their way is to get out of the office and into Hurricane Hope, and that's to be around kids. And it's difficult to say that because oftentimes school leaders will receive that advice as another thing to add to their to-do list. And what I explore in the book are ways to get 2-for-1 deals where you're around the children, but you're also getting a lot of work done. You're in the classrooms and you're in the hallways, etc. So there are ways to do it, but the kids are the sunshine that keeps us going. They're why we got into the work in the first place. So being around kids, I think, is step one. Number two is community. It's a very lonely job. And again, you're absorbing so much negativity and no one on your campus understands what your role is and what you're experiencing. In the book, I have a chapter called N is for Navy Blue Blazers. If you go to any school conference, you see all of us in our navy blue blazers and we're posturing and we're holding court and we're talking about how great things are. And it's very rare that school leaders get real with one another. And so an invitation to real intentional community is a challenge I make in the book to school leaders to create some groups where there's an intentionality around, yes, sharing and scaling best practices, but also shouldering each other's burdens. WTF space for school leaders is a real gift. And it's hard because you're a public figure and part of your responsibility is to offer a positive narrative about your school and your school community. So real authentic spaces with other school leaders is crucial. Number three, I talk about the crazy of the job. The reality is kid crazy doesn't drive us crazy. It's the adult crazy that drives us crazy. And a school leader's desk is a customer service desk. So one of the mistakes I made in my journey as a leader is I was often annoyed by the crazy instead of just expecting the crazy and being wonderfully surprised when you got through a day without it. And so just flipping the narrative on crazy, I think, is important. And I explore a few strategies in that regard in the book. And then I also offer C is for comedy, learning to laugh at all the things that happen. There's a lot to be serious about in schools and in school leadership. And there's no more important work on the planet than the work we do in schools. So we have to take it seriously. We just don't have to take ourselves so seriously. So my chapter R is for remember rule number 6. Rule number 6 is there's just a great story. It basically comes down to not taking yourself so seriously and learning to laugh at yourself and the craziness that is in a school day. And then last but not least, about 2 years ago, I started working with a counselor, and I also started working with an executive leadership coach. And this practice is becoming commonplace in the profit sector. And my hope is that school leaders will start partnering with leadership coaches and counselors to have a partner in the journey, because ultimately that partnership will help school leaders grow and become better people. Ultimately, the only way to become a better leader is to become a better person. So that's a lot of spaghetti to throw at you, but those 5 approaches, being around kids, being intentional about community and with other school leaders, embracing the crazy, trying to dial up the laughter factor and more comedy, and then partnering with a trained counselor or coach is really the recipe for leading well without losing your way.
I think the classical thinking about coaching, especially for administrators from a district perspective, is we're willing to pay for coaching if someone is new. We're willing to pay for coaching if someone is doing poorly, but we're not necessarily willing to pay for coaching just as part of the cost of having someone in a very difficult job. How do you think districts should think about coaching as an investment, given how things are in the world today?
The reality is, I think districts can look to the for-profit world and see that there is a clear embrace of the return on investment for C-suite executives who are shouldering the stresses of leading organizations as a best practice. And ultimately, if we are in the personal growth business and working with children, I invite districts and challenge districts to embrace the fact that the only way leaders grow as leaders is if leaders are growing as people. And if we're not investing in our leaders to grow as people, the premise is that there's no more growth to be had there, which obviously fundamentally disagrees with the premise of the entire project of schools. If we're going to model growth for our schools, for our faculty, and our faculty for the children, it's one of the best ways to grow as a human being is to partner with a counselor or a coach. And so if we're modeling that for our districts en masse, there's no better way than to endorse coaches for leaders.
Well, I'm glad that need for coaching is being increasingly recognized. For people who are in an organization where perhaps that is not so readily recognized, they may be feeling a little bit more alone and that they have to either advocate for themselves or even take care of those needs for coaching and support completely on their own. What are some steps that people can take to really get ahead of the burnout and the stress that can affect school leaders?
Well, ideally, Justin, of course, school leaders will be able to access professional development resources and district funds to support their coaching partnership. And I would also say that if that's not available, it still would be the best investment they can make in themselves. Particularly as they explore a potential coaching partnership, it's important to look for someone who has formal training and someone specifically who's earned credentials through the ICF. We have a lot of former school leaders out putting out a shingle as coaches. And too often times a school leader will partner with them and then spend time listening to former, old war stories about the days when that former school leader coach was in the trenches. So I would really encourage school leaders to invest their own resources. And it doesn't have to be as expensive as they may think. There are a lot of coaches. For example, my consultancy, Falcor, we're committed to honoring clients from across the socioeconomic spectrum. And we're committed to ensuring that coaching is available to anyone, regardless of ability to pay. So I would really encourage folks to reach out, take coaches up on their offers to have a complimentary connection call to get a feel for the coach. And then also to be very candid to say, listen, my district doesn't support this for me. I really want to try it for my own personal growth. What kind of flexibility do you have on a fee structure? I'd be really shocked if they had 2 or 3 conversations and explored a partnership with 2 or 3 different coaches. I'd be shocked if at least not one of them worked with them in terms of that initial investment. This is something, coaches come to this work to help people, not to make millions of dollars. So I would really encourage folks, take coaches up on that complimentary connection call and then explore what that investment might look like for them.
It strikes me that we're in the business of solving problems for other people, right? We're constantly, as you said, absorbing negativity and running interference and dealing with situations so that they don't disrupt teaching and learning. But often we don't really think about the impact that all of that has on us. You talk in the book quite a bit about knowing yourself and kind of developing that self-awareness. And of course, we talked about getting some coaching support with that. What are some of the tools that have helped you with self-awareness and just kind of understanding your style and how you process things?
In order to lead others well, we need to know how to lead ourselves well. And in order to lead ourselves well, we need to know ourselves well. So this concept of, coined by Aristotle, know thyself, is crucial. 3 particular tools I've found really valuable in working with clients and for myself personally have been the Enneagram, the Myers-Briggs, and then also StrengthsFinder. And those 3 coupled together create a pretty compelling portrait of ourselves, both our strengths and our weaknesses. Equipping ourselves with that knowledge really helps us notice ourselves, being ourselves in the various situations that school leadership presents us every day.
Yeah, it's been interesting for me in just recent years to learn more about the Enneagram, and I didn't really know what that was or what kind of thing that was until I started to hear lots of examples of the different styles. And I think that was very helpful to me to understand that, other people are not necessarily wrong, and I'm not necessarily wrong for, thinking the way that we respectively do. It's just that there are a lot of different styles out there. And as school leaders, we have to figure out how to work with lots of different types of people and not see everyone through the same lens and see ourselves through the same lens as other people might see us. So if you wouldn't mind, tell us a little bit about the Enneagram in particular. I know a little bit. I wouldn't say I have a comprehensive understanding, but I know there's a lot of potential there. So take us into that, if you would.
Well, Justin, I'm a little bit like your CrossFit friends who love to talk about CrossFit when it comes to the Enneagram. So happy to talk about it with you. The origins of the Enneagram go all the way back to Philo and Pythagorean. And the 20th century, it was kind of brought into popularity in the 20th century by a German philosopher named George Gurdjieff. And I certainly butchered the pronunciation of his name. And then most recently was brought into the modern psychology context by a Chilean psychologist named Claudio Naranjo. And basically it's 9 personality typologies. that explore not just what can describe us as a person, but really our core motivations. And a big takeaway that I'd offer your listeners and leaders that was illuminating for me personally is while you have a primary type, I'm a 2, for example. I think you and I mentioned before we got on air that you're a 5, named by your partner. One of the important things about the Enneagram is not just who we are when we're our best selves, but it also shines light on who we are when we're our stressed, exhausted selves. And this dark side of ourselves, it's kind of like in the movie Gremlins, like this dark side of ourselves, we're these fuzzy, happy creatures. And when we're stressed or fatigued, water gets sprayed on us and the gremlin in us comes out. And so instead of narrating it as just poor character, we start to understand ourselves that, wow, I have this dark side in me that I don't like at all. And I need to be mindful of the context I'm in, be mindful of my own wellness practices so that evil gremlin never comes out. So the awareness of the Enneagram, not only does it help us understand all of the people we're interacting with, and it's fun to do with teams to understand everyone's Enneagram, but also from a self-awareness standpoint to understand that the dark side of ourselves, that we all have it, and then to be mindful of it so that dark gremlin never comes out to play.
Well, Bradley, I know a lot of the book is about self-awareness, as we've said, and taking care of yourself and figuring out how to best take care of yourself when the stress is getting high. But it's also a book about leading well. What are some of your top takeaways for leaders on how to lead well?
A few come to mind, Justin. First of all, appreciation. I write a chapter called A is for Appreciation. And I must say that if you get appreciation right, your school will be transformed, bottom line. I cite a pretty impressive human, this guy named Lee Cockrell. He's a former vice president of Disney, and he wrote a wonderful book called Creating Magic. And in it, he talks about the fact that during his career, he wrote 7 handwritten notes of appreciation every single week to front cast characters, 700. And he talks about the importance of appreciation, burning the free fuel. And so my challenge to clients and school leaders and to myself when I was in the trenches as a school leader is, can we write at least one a day? And, so many of us walk our campuses looking for weeds to pull instead of plants to water. And I just want to invite school leaders' awareness to oftentimes the best way to eradicate the bad is to emphasize the good. So when we walk around our campuses thinking, hey, I'm going to write at least one note of appreciation today, you start looking for the good stuff and being able to celebrate our teachers for that good stuff. It's pretty amazing. When you water good stuff, it becomes great and it spreads. So number 1 would be appreciation. And number 2, I would say, is culture. Just hammer on culture, even before curriculum. And I know that'll make some people uncomfortable, but I believe passionately that culture is the secret sauce of educational excellence. And big kids and small kids alike thrive in caring and consistent environments. And we're shaped by what you see, say, hear, and do. And if a school leader can really focus on what kind of culture, what kind of community are we creating, it's really providing the pot and the soil for amazing things to grow. So between appreciation and culture, that can keep you busy all day, of course. And I can't really think of better things to invest your time and energy into.
And it's so renewing, isn't it, to focus on someone else and to focus on our gratitude for someone else and their contributions. Like, it really gets me out of my head to think about other people like that.
100%.
So the book is School Leadership from A to Z, How to Lead Well Without Losing Your Way. And Bradley, if people want to learn more about your work or get in touch with you, where's the best place for them to go online?
Best place to go is my website, www.bradleyjamesdavies.com. And folks can also find me at bradley.james.davies on Instagram and also Bradley James Davies on Facebook. So would love to connect with folks.
Well, Bradley, thank you so much for joining me on Principal Center Radio. It's been a pleasure.
Justin, thank you so much. I've really enjoyed it.
Thanks for listening to Principal Center Radio. For more great episodes, subscribe on our website at principalcenter.com/radio.